Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 176th edition of the Frank and Stan chat. And for those watching on video, you'll notice that at the bottom of the screen we have a guest. So I'm pleased to say that Lea Weston is joining us from somewhere down in the southwest, I think. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm in Chudley, and yeah, Talking Heads Supervision is based here in a small town in Devon.
Brilliant. Now, the reason why, Lea, you and Stan have so much in common, all right, and this is all going to be revealed over the next half hour or not. But Lea, do you want to just explain who you are and what you do? And that might be a clue for those who watch Frank and Stan chat as to why you and Stan might have quite a lot in common.
Yeah, and I'm waiting to find out. It's exciting. What do I do? I offer external supervision to head teachers, senior leaders in educational settings. 5 years ago, I was doing that on my own in terms of Talking Heads. Of course, there are other people doing it. There are now 41 of us doing it all over the country. So that is more than half of my month's worth of work, and we're working in specialist settings, independent settings, mainstream settings, and FE colleges. But I also am the quality assurance lead and helped establish all of the work with education support in England and Wales. And yes, that has been a phenomenal journey. So through that, we have worked with over 1,000 senior leaders.
Right, gosh.
The last few years. And
so what did you do before this? How did you get into this area of work?
Yeah, okay, that's a question. So with so many layers of answers. Fundamentally, I'm a drama therapist. So for all of my career, I have worked with children and young people. I did think about becoming a teacher, but in my wisdom, I recognized that I really liked the children that would struggle not to be in class, and thought that wouldn't make me a very good teacher. And I really love the children and young people who struggle to be in class. And so I've worked with them throughout my career. And I spent 10 years in the NHS as a clinical lead in adult acute mental health services for people with a profound multiple learning disability. So those things really fit together, I guess, in terms of having to think about a system and how it supports people and finding their voices or helping them articulate something. And I've been a supervisor, which began in the NHS, for 18 years.
Right.
And when I left the NHS and was working predominantly as a therapist, supervision is always in the background. It's like that thing that does something kind of really invisible, but is scaffolding and really supports the person in doing their work. And I was doing a lot of work in schools as a therapist and a bit as a supervisor. And a head teacher made a throwaway comment, and I was avoiding writing a dissertation. And he said, "Lea, imagine what a difference to children you would make if you offered this supervision thing that you do for my colleague to head teachers in schools." Oh my goodness. I mean, I can't, still makes me goosebump. I just think I'm so grateful to him for that comment and my avoidance of my dissertation, which I did get in, by the way. But it kind of has all come from there. So the School for Social Entrepreneurs helped us set up, or me as it was, in 2018, and it's gone on from there. But for me, it's all about children and young people. What I'm doing, really, those are the young people's lives I want to change. What's fantastic about that is the connection that supervision has absolutely between children and young people's outcomes and the person who's doing the work and how they are, and that connection is vital. Maybe that's what Stan and I have in common.
I think that might be, mightn't it, Stan?
I'll tell you my pathway into agreeing with what you're saying.
Okay.
I was asked to do a profile of leadership for children's trusts when they existed, which involved all the services, and they wanted one set of leadership standards that any of the groups could meet, at least, or it was behaviors more than standards. And so I had to look at the police, fire, national health, etc., all their leadership standards in order to pull something together that everyone could recognise and look at. And I came across supervision in that, it's particularly in the NHS.
Yeah.
And the more I read into it and the more I saw how this was enhancing people's work, it just struck me that this didn't happen in schools at all. And the nearest thing was appraisal, which was not anything like supervision. So from then on, and Frank will say I'm neither about it, but I just say that there's not the capacity. Schools haven't got the funds, recognised funds, to say you should be having supervision, and I think that should be part of the funding that schools get, to say for staff well-being, etc. There should, to some extent, for performance, there should be an allocated budget for supervision that the school decides who and how it's used. But of course, that's never happened.
No. So when, as somebody who's, I mean, I think I understand what supervision is, but for those who perhaps are not familiar with it, Lisa, is it worth just explaining what that actually involves?
Yes, in brief, so that we're not here for another 4 days. It is, I mean, you're right, Stan. For me, I'm kind of bringing across something that is from health and social care that's been there a really long time, and it absolutely works well, that's what I've been piloting, really, to bring it over. And so it is a regular, that is really key. It must be regular, repeated conversation with someone that you trust, to hear you talk about in a confidential space who you are, how you are, what's going on at work. It is developmental. It is absolutely not crisis intervention. It's not counselling, because counselling is about you. Supervision is ultimately, no matter how personal it sometimes becomes, it will always come back to children and young people. It has, the purpose is safeguarding, absolutely. You know, who else in the world, the amount of our senior leaders that will say, no one asks me questions that they need to ask me anymore, not the ones that really matter. They don't hold me accountable in the way that matters, but supervision does. It's that kind of really deep ethical accountability. The reasons that any of us went into helping professions, of which teaching is definitely one, you know, supervision holds us in that place. And it's if we're really struggling, if we're really on the edge, which many are right now, one of the reasons it really needs to be regular and someone you really trust is because when we're really, really on the edge, a lot of shame comes in, that sense that we can't cope. Shame is difficult enough at the best of times. It really needs someone safe and a safe space to pick that through, so that you don't tip into it, shut down, walk away, and never go back and have nowhere to take it. We deal on repeat with that place if necessary. And I think, you know, obviously that is a really, really crucial place. But at the other end of the spectrum, it's developmental, it's celebratory. Often many of us are fine at work, and therefore we're growing in that place of regularly turning up to supervision, and that opportunity to kind of just bounce along, check in, what's going on, how am I doing, what am I thinking, oh, how are you with this month about that thing that you were, oh yeah, that's happened and it's gone this way, or it's got, you know, it's phenomenal when it's working well, and it's a lifesaver for many when things are not so good, which, being human, is normal.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, go on, Stan, you were going to say?
I was just going to say, Lisa, how do you differentiate between supervision and coaching?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. I talk about it every single day. Coaching is phenomenal and different because it's usually short term, and it will be about the coachee. So whilst you might be talking about work and it be impactful on the system and children, that's not its primary focus. The primary focus is the coachee. It's future oriented, it's goal oriented. Supervision looks backwards, forwards, and in the moment, depending on what's happening. It's very much about stirring the soup, processing, you know, whatever is needed in that moment on that day by your school. That's what gets brought to supervision. It's not kind of bouncing along, okay, this is session 2, we're working through these goals over the next 6 sessions. That's not what it is.
Yeah, I mean,
what I think's happening is where schools are sort of seeing the need to talk, coaching seems to be the sexy thing that we can train our people to do.
Yeah. I don't want supervision to become sexy at all. Like, not
Oh, no,
even.
I think that's going to be the quote of the chat. I don't want supervision to be sexy.
Perhaps I should not have said that. You know,
That's all right.
it's scaffolding. We want supervision, but the thing I care about the most in the world is it kind of not becoming sexy and misunderstood or conflated, because then it will be done badly. And this kind of idea that it's some sort of add-on training that you can do in 3 days, and it's best done by someone who's done a 3-day training. No, just no.
So is it more of a safe place? I mean, I'm thinking when I worked in Ofsted, I was contacted by somebody I don't know who the hell they were. I didn't know at the time. I still can't remember the name. But in effect, what was happening was Ofsted decided that 5 or 6 senior managers were going to have a coach. And this bloke, Ofsted didn't tell me, by the way, they were doing this. So this guy contacted me. And as it turned out, I still a couple of things I learned, but they were very, and I valued them, but they're very work orientated. I don't think I've ever had anybody, apart from Mrs. Norris or perhaps Stan, who I could actually open up in a safe way to sort of say how I was feeling and whether or not I was coping. So is it more of a personal sort of reflection on how you feel and how you can how perhaps telling somebody like yourself, Lisa, which is you're not actually part of the school, you're not part of it, you're separate to it. I mean, is that a key element of it? And because what's in my head is what Ofsted did was sort of impose something on me. You know, if you're going to do this in a school setting, how do you actually get that rolling if it isn't about not imposing but sort of suggesting? You know, where is that contact point? Where's the first point of contact to make this work well?
Oh, there's a lot in there, Frank. I mean, one of the things that I do, no matter where we're at now, is that I always put in the first phone call to someone that wants supervision. We don't, and we have not done any marketing, nor I hope will we ever. It's entirely been word of mouth. And our relationships have grown and people have stayed. That's how come we have grown. And one of the reasons that I'm hearing myself say now, 5 years on, that I still do that initial phone call is to try and match them to someone on my team. So I know my team really well. And I also know that no matter how good I am at that, I can't fundamentally account for what happens between 2 people in a room. Yeah. And we all really care about it being right and a good fit, that relationship. So if something doesn't feel right, because sometimes it doesn't, I want that person to know they can come back to me. I will take care of my colleague, and because they're still human, it can feel like rejection, even though it's professional rejection. I take care of them. Meanwhile, I sort it out and reallocate within my team. So that's really important. What I've noticed is that now my wish is happening, that we're beginning with, our senior leaders, and then it's really good for them. And they're like, can you see my deputy head? Can you see someone else in my team? Yes. But of course, at that point, they're being told it's good for them. So that's that thing you're talking about. And so again, in conversation, if I pick it up, because that's what another part of the phone call, I can really try to ease that pathway and go, look, I know, I can hear you saying you're resistant. I can hear you now saying that you're being told that this is good for you. This is what it is. It's the offer. The person needs to be right. Can we try and, actually, wouldn't it be good to have a place to talk about work? But honestly, if it doesn't work for you and the person's not right, you come back to me. We're not going to make you do this. It's got to be right. And so I just try to, from the offset, the very first phone call, try to kind of ease that possible resistance. No one likes to be told something's good for them, which is why even if schools have one day in their budget, something that's got the title of supervision on it, people will disagree with me right now, and so that's okay. But I passionately believe that you need really solid, good providers that are experienced out there, so there's choice, because one size won't fit all. And there is nothing worse than having bad supervision with someone you don't go. People don't go. You won't go. And bad supervision is undermining. It makes people feel criticized. It's on the edge of something quite appalling. It damages confidence. It's got to be good quality and right for you. And if it's not right for you, you need to know where to go to find someone else.
I can remember having a conversation with a children's social worker, who was telling me some of the horrors that she had been through, and I said, I don't know how you cope, and she said, I cope because of supervision.
Yeah, me too.
Because I can unload it all, and I don't then carry that with me for the rest of the month or the week or the whatever time.
No.
It's interesting because before the chat starts, we always sort of get a feel for what we're going to talk about this week. But this leads quite neatly, doesn't it, Lisa, into what you've been doing this week in terms of your team and knowing your team really well, because that actually must help you with the matching process and actually the development, Dan keeps saying, the culture of your organization, you know. So do you want to just tell us about, you know, what you've been doing this week, which is really what I think's caught your eye?
Yeah, I was saying, I was worried that I haven't been outward looking, and because I've been absorbed from Monday to early Wednesday morning with my kind of newly emerging core team, because we have grown because of the work with education support and demand at Talking Heads, and a kind of really learning on an absolute daily basis that the system that I guess Talking Heads is becoming, its culture, when, you know, there are 41 of us now and not me, what I create has to be absolutely safe, nourishing, a place of mistakes where people, all the things that we might think of as a really awful culture cannot happen at Talking Heads. You know, and that my nourishing my team and the system that I'm creating is everything, because otherwise, you know, if we are ultimately safeguarding the safeguarders, which is why they come to us, and we are malnourished,
Yes, yeah,
well, we're just replicating that other system that will get no name, that passes judgments, etc., etc.,
yeah.
and that top system and that culture that is malnourished and ill-resourced. We cannot be that. So my team, they need to be loving their work, they need to be trusted, they need to feel safe, they need to know that we're responsive, and we are all those things, but we're now a big team. And so
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize there were that number, because actually there is, as businesses grow, the risks increase. You know, just bringing another person in, you know, who's making the call that you used to make creates.
Oh, that's not happening.
So how are you? I'm not asking you to sort of reveal, you know, the quality of your team or anything, but how do you ensure though that, you know, everybody does buy into this approach? And, you know, how I suppose quality assure it, but how do you actually make sure that those conversations are right when in fact you can't be there, you know, yourself?
No. So I guess in the early days when we grew, it was reputational, collegiate kind of alignment of values. And then we have partly grown because I did all of the recruitment for education support, that work there, and the quality. And so people needed to have over a couple of 100 hours worth of experience. They need to have done at least a year's worth of training. They need to be in ongoing supervision. We asked for their supervisor to feedback. We asked for supervisee to feedback. Obviously, we interviewed and we're very thoughtful about those questions. We have monthly drop-ins. We have one-to-one sessions every 6 weeks. Those are all in the calendar. We're starting to have team days, ed support and Talking Heads twice a year. We are talking and asking each other questions. But fundamentally, the alignments of it's around values and a passionate belief about this making a difference. And I wasn't the only one out there thinking this would make a difference to head teachers. So, and then the feedback, you know, no one's going anywhere. People stay.
Right.
And honestly, you know, senior leaders are extremely busy. You're not going to turn up to something an hour a month that's of no use.
Yes.
No way.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Where do these conversations take place? Are they in the school or are they in a neutral venue?
You need to get out of school. I mean, occasionally people aren't able to, but again, in my first phone call, it sounds like a very long phone call. I don't think it's too I'm really clear that mostly sessions are happening on Zoom, you know, for reasons we can imagine. but I ask them to imagine that actually they are leaving the building and getting into some kind of transport where they in some ways will prepare in that travelling journey and of leaving school. They would be met with a tea, coffee, no one would burst in on the room, they would turn their phone off, it would be warm, they could probably see some birds out of a window, and at which point I can hear them on the phone going, oh God, that sounds amazing. I'm like, yes, so please try to plan and stay at home or go home. Because actually as senior leaders, quite often they do have that time anyway. So we're also very clear that it happens during the day. This is a work conversation. This is not something we're doing in the evening.
Right.
This is hard work, actually. It's fantastic, but after an hour, you'll be like, oh.
Can I ask? I mean, I can imagine these conversations can throw up some things that can actually be quite painful, or perhaps because I think for me personally, I think that there are some things. Well, everybody's got things in the cupboard that they don't want to reveal, you know. And if you're in that really relaxed position, you know, where you think, you know, obviously everything's confidential, but not everything could be confidential, you know. So I mean, how are those sorts of issues managed? Is it that the colleague just steers away from it if it feels as though it's getting too close, or is it actually about an opening up and a revealing?
The purpose of sharing, ultimately, the boundary that always gets held and the contracted reason for the conversation is always the thing that keeps it very safe, because it isn't counselling. But it's true that, you know, sometimes we lose people who are dying, or happen at school, and trauma arises in the room. Again, that is one of the reasons why you need to be sitting with a skilled professional. You need to know that if something, and I think you're talking at that more extreme moment that leaves you very vulnerable, then you need to sit with someone who knows how to literally not let you leave the room until you're safe again. You know, if you really open something that leads to shaking, or, you know, something that needs then ongoing kind of safeguarding attention around that person's.
So interesting. Stanley, it's in my head here is that this is about good inspection, isn't it? This is about skilled people who've been around the block a few times, who have a sort of a manner and a way in which they manage and deal with people, that when we were working in that field, I felt reasonably confident that the people we were working with had that approach, you know. And I think some of the things, you know, you were sharing before an Ofsted report that you felt perhaps was a bit unjust and whatever. The unjustness of it might be something else, but actually how it was managed, you know, the whole process underpinning that inspection, you know, for me, that's something that we haven't got. We don't have that depth of.
Well, I don't hear about that in supervision at all. Never. I mean, that never comes up.
The bit about confidentiality always, and I'm glad what you said was not everything can be confidential, because we used to do mentor training for new head teachers where we would pair them up with an experienced head teacher. And when I was watching the sort of training for this as the manager, I heard them saying everything you say will be treated in confidence. And I had to sort of break in and say, actually, that's not true. If you tell your mentor that you keep children shut in a cupboard if they make a fuss, they will have to report that. That's not confidential. So, you know, confidentiality is a funny thing in that you want to think it's confidential in that it's between you, me. But if I'm telling you things that are not right, then somebody has to.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the key from the beginning. That is within our spoken contract, our contract with schools, that we're very clear. I'll ultimately, it's about safeguarding children, isn't it? So actually, if you tell me, and that includes a fitness to practice conversation, you know, actually, if you
fitness to practice, I've not heard that phrase before. A fitness to practice.
It's something I'm really passionate about. That is a crossover from, I know it's not regulated yet, but from HCPC, you know, from having supervision in the bodies, actually. And that's where the well-being bit comes in. You know, if we are on the edge of burnout, we are not fit to be at work. And that is a very tender conversation, but it is one we are very clear that we will have. And I get a couple of phone calls a month from my colleagues going, I've just done the supervision. I'm worried this person's, got a plan in place. What do we do? And so, we have those conversations with each other, because that can't stay private. That's not okay. What can we do to safeguard that person? So far, it has been the case that we have worked very clearly to help that person recognise what needs to happen next, and that they need to go off, and that we do a welfare check the next day. And every time we have then been able to trigger a kind of support system. And it's that level, but that is our job. That is our job.
Well, let's move on. We've captured what I think we might have captured what caught your eye this week, but I think it was. But let's move to Stan. What's caught your eye? I mean, Stan, can I just say now, because we've probably got about another 10 minutes of this conversation.
I should keep it short and sweet then. My week has been full of bureaucratic nonsense, in my view. People who can't get away from what the rule book says or what the guidance says, to say, but this isn't making any sense. The example I'll give is the bank. My bank were trying to organise something for me so I could oversee the account of my mother. This is a special group in the bank, so I filled everything out at the branch, and then the central unit said, but the branch haven't sent us what they should send us. So I said, well, have you asked them for it? We've sent them an email, right, but they've not replied to the email. So in fact, we've sent them 3 emails and they've not applied to any of them. So have you spoken to the branch to find out why they're not replying? Oh, we can't do that. We don't have the facility to speak to them. So your solution is to keep sending emails to somebody who's not replying. That should sort the problem out. And it's that kind of, this is what the rule book says I must do, compared to let's look at what is sensible here. We need to find out why this person isn't responding. So let's email somebody else at the same branch and find out if they're okay. Or, but to say we can't ring the branch is just, for me, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah. What's going through my head there, Stan, is when you phone a school up, it might be a primary school, and you all you want to do is speak to somebody, and then you think, well, there are 7 options here. I'm not quite sure any of them cover mine. So then you end up, if there's anything else, it's always the last one, isn't it? If there's anything else, press this button, and then you speak to somebody. But actually, if you could just speak to somebody at the start, they could then press the button to say, well, I think it's going to be number 4. But actually, and also I had something with Virgin Media recently where they have this little bot thing, and so I tried that, and I just couldn't get it to work, and so I ended up phoning. But now you don't speak to a person, you speak to like a computer, and actually what I wanted was a cable so that I could move my Virgin box to another place in the room. That was just too difficult, and then you end up having to send an email. Because the system won't can't understand you, so you're not dealing with a human being anymore.
Well, I think I'm as guilty, and we're as guilty as anybody else, because of things like WhatsApp. We have WhatsApp conversations with our children when it's far much more easy to ring them and say, let's just talk about this, rather than.
But they don't answer the phone, do they? Well, their phone's on silent.
Don't talk to my wife about my phone being on silent. Right, now what's caught my eye, because this week I ended up doing a presentation. I haven't done one for a while because just the nature of work, and I used to do a lot of those, but so I was a little bit nervous about doing it. But it was with some future leaders in Nottingham, and I was really struck, I think, by the fact that there was this sort of feeling around rebrokerage of schools, and it got me thinking about, well, the place of competition over collaboration, and I said, competitions, we all have a competitive streak in us, but there is a point at which it becomes quite damaging. And I said, I just, the old sort of thing about, well, is it great that there's an outstanding school in a town? And it actually is outstanding because it's creaming off in effect, the most academic kids from neighbouring schools, which actually means that they're struggling to even get to an acceptable standard. You know, that's where competition has really warped into something quite damaging for a community. And I mean, I've been down that road a few times, and actually, when I've raised it, I mean, people feel as in the past, people were saying, "Oh, well, competition's always there. You're never going to stop it, whatever." And I was thinking, well, yeah, we can stop it. We can stop it. We can have it whereby every school has a responsibility for everybody in the community. And the fact that they come to your school doesn't mean to say that you're ignoring what's happening in other schools nearby where you might be able to help, but you choose not to because you want to be the best.
That was exactly what I encountered when I was working with in one authority with lots of schools and lots of heads who genuinely wanted to work as a community. Absolutely genuine. It was a whole plan. We want to work together. We want to be a group. And so I said, so at what point are you prepared to move your brilliant year 6 teacher to the school down the road who haven't got a very good year 6 teacher, so we can improve things for those children? Can't do that.
Yeah.
Not doing that. So actually, you're not yet committed to what you say you're committed to. What you committed to, what you say you're committed to is that would happen. We would share resources. But actually, while there's that element of I could be caught out if my results drop, then we can't move forward with this any further, really.
I think one of the things that I was struck by at that session was, and I'm going to Blackpool today for my last primary heads and special heads meeting, is, when you go to these meetings, I just feel inspired by the ambition and the positivity that these colleagues bring to it, and even though they're under significant pressure, there is still that, well, there's a job to be done. I still feel when I leave the meetings as if, I think I tweeted about, education is in a good place when it's got these people in charge of schools, so I continue to be astounded, bearing in mind all the rubbish that we've seen, Stano, since we started these in 2020, these chats. There's still people out there just punching well above their weight. It's amazing what they're doing.
I think if you get to their values, it's very clear that they do share these values and they do have a view. I'm like you, Frank. I'm always impressed when you get a group of heads together and talk about what's possible, but then it gets stalled by the barriers that are bigger than individual schools and even bigger than communities. And I know I've banged on about this, and I know you have, Frank, forever. But why not let Ofsted judge communities rather than individual schools? So we go to an area, we look at all the schools, we look at the healthcare, we look at the children's social care, and then we describe what it's like to live here and how things could be improved in that community by school A doing better results, social workers in this area perhaps working a bit more effectively, rather than individual schools.
I think EHE, elective home education, and the numbers that are going down that road now are increasing. That I think that's going to force that sort of thinking about, well, why are parents and carers choosing to educate them at home? What are the factors that are influencing that? Well, it's around special educational needs provision in schools. It's about the way that young people are, the curriculum they have. It's the way they're spoken to. What happens. It's all of that stuff. It's not that this idea that parents have just decided that I'm going to do it at home because I want to do it. I want to be sort of different, and I want to be alternative. They can't handle the concerns that their children are bringing home, and they think, well, I can do a better job here.
Engagement, Frank, isn't there? There's a lack of youth engagement now that used to be organised by local authorities. and I don't know a local authority that still has that capacity. And therefore there were other opportunities for young people to meet and do things which encouraged them to work with each other or to be with each other. It meant school was an extension, or the youth was an extension of school either way, but it was a firmer bond than we have now, because
Yes.
you've got school, and in some cases you're on your own.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's the end of edition 176. I can't believe 176 of these, Stan. I mean, anyway, and the numbers of people watching are growing. I mean, it's just fantastic. We just, when we started, just wanted a chat between Frank and Stan. But thanks everybody for watching, for listening. Thank you very much, Lisa, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa.
I mean, we always say the guests are the bits that people watch for. You know, that they're not watching for Frank and Stan wittering on, that it's the contribution that you bring, you know, the freshness you bring and the insight you bring, that I think that makes a difference. And consistently, that's what people tell us.
I feel as though now we can carry on our crusade to say supervision is something that should be in schools.
Yeah.
Because I feel a little bit more informed about it, and I've got somewhere now that I can point people and say, read this or look at this. So
what we'll do also is we'll put a little link to your website and to your business at the end of the video, and we'll leave it on there so you can scratch it up on a piece of paper and make contact with Lisa. But thank you everybody for joining us. We'll be back, all being well, next week. So from all of us, goodbye.